A lone figure watched through her scope as 8 Navy SEALs fought for their lives in the valley below, surrounded by 40 insurgents closing in for the kill. She had one choice: break every rule in the book or watch America's finest die in the dirt. Her finger moved to the trigger. If you love your mom and dad, hit that subscribe button and show some love to this channel. The Hindu Kush mountains stood like jagged teeth against the Afghan sky, their peaks still crowned with snow even in late summer. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves had been lying in the same position for 6 hours, her body molded into the rocky outcrop 3,000 feet above the valley floor. The August sun had baked her ghillie suit until it felt like she was wearing an oven, but she didn't move. Couldn't move. Movement meant detection, and detection meant death. She wasn't supposed to be here. According to her orders, she should have been 40 miles south, providing overwatch for a routine supply convoy. But Maya had learned long ago that the difference between following orders and doing what was right often came down to split-second decisions made in the dark. Last night, monitoring the radio chatter from her designated position, she'd intercepted fragments of intelligence about a high-value target moving through this valley. Something in her gut told her the official mission was wrong, that the real action would happen here. So she'd moved. Alone. Without authorization. Without backup. Now, watching through her Leopold Mark IV scope, she knew her instincts had been correct. But being right didn't make what she was seeing any easier to stomach. 8 Navy SEALs were pinned down in the valley below, their backs against a crumbling mud brick compound that offered minimal cover. Maya counted at least 40 hostiles moving through the surrounding ridges, a coordinated force that had clearly been waiting for exactly this moment. The ambush had been perfect. Too perfect. Someone had fed them intelligence, and these elite warriors had walked straight into a trap designed specifically to kill them. Through her scope, Maya watched the SEAL team leader, a broad-shouldered operator she could identify by his distinctive movement patterns as Lieutenant Commander James Hawthorne. She'd studied footage of various SEAL teams during her sniper training, learning to recognize American forces at distance to avoid friendly fire incidents. Hawthorne was legendary in special operations circles, a man who'd completed more successful missions than most operators would see in 3 careers. Now he was screaming into his radio, calling for air support that Maya knew wouldn't arrive in time. The nearest Apache helicopters were 20 minutes out. The SEALs had maybe 5. Maya's earpiece crackled with their frantic communications. The voices were strained but professional, men trained to maintain composure even as death closed in from all sides. She heard someone shout, "We're surrounded," followed by the staccato bark of automatic weapons fire echoing through the valley. Her hands remained steady on her rifle. She'd been trained at the Army Marksmanship Unit in Fort Benning, where she'd shattered every long-range shooting record the facility had ever seen. At 26 years old, she was one of only a handful of female snipers deployed in active combat zones, and the only one currently operating in Afghanistan. The military still had complicated feelings about women in direct combat roles, which meant Maya had to be twice as good just to be considered half as capable. She was better than twice as good. She was the best they had. But right now, that skill came with an impossible choice. Her rules of engagement were crystal clear. She was not authorized to fire without direct orders from her commanding officer. She was not authorized to engage in operations outside her designated mission parameters. She was not even supposed to be in this valley. If she fired now, she would be violating at least a dozen military regulations. Her career would be over. She might face court-martial. But if she didn't fire, 8 of America's finest warriors would die in the next few minutes. Maya's finger rested on the trigger guard, not quite touching the trigger itself. She'd been trained to compartmentalize, to separate emotion from action. But watching those men fight for their lives stirred something primal in her chest. These weren't statistics or tactical assets. They were sons, brothers, maybe fathers. They were Americans who'd volunteered to walk into hell so others wouldn't have to. The insurgents were tightening their noose. Maya identified their pattern. They were using classic encirclement tactics, pushing from three sides while leaving one apparent escape route open. That route would lead straight into a kill zone where the rest of their forces waited. The SEALs had to know it was a trap, but they had no other options. Stay put and get overrun, or move and get slaughtered. Through her scope, Maya saw Hawthorne making his decision. He was signaling his team to prepare for movement. They were going to try to break out through the kill zone. It was suicide, but it was the only play they had left. Maya's breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped to 50 beats per minute, a physiological response she'd learned to trigger through years of practice. The wind was gusting at 8 miles per hour from the southwest. Temperature was 94 degrees. Humidity was low. She was shooting at a 37-degree downward angle across a distance of approximately 1,200 yards. These weren't difficult conditions for a shooter of her caliber. What made this difficult was everything that would come after. She made her choice. The first shot broke the mountain silence like thunder. An insurgent who'd been positioning himself on the western ridge dropped instantly, killed before the sound of the rifle even reached him. Maya had already chambered another round before his body hit the ground. Her second shot took out the machine gunner who'd been setting up to enfilade the SEAL's position. Third shot eliminated a spotter calling coordinates into his radio. In the valley below, the SEALs reacted with the trained precision of elite warriors. They didn't know who was shooting or from where, but they recognized suppressing fire when they heard it. Hawthorne immediately shifted his team's defensive posture, taking advantage of the confusion to relocate to better cover. Maya fired again. And again. Each shot was a calculated execution, removing the most dangerous threats first. The insurgent commander directing the assault from a protected position behind a boulder. The RPG team preparing to fire on the compound. The designated marksman trying to pin down the SEALs with precision fire. The enemy force began to scatter. They'd been expecting a quick slaughter, not resistance from an unknown sniper position high in the mountains. Maya watched them through her scope, reading their confusion and fear. Some were pointing toward her general direction, but at over 1,000 yards and with her ghillie suit blending perfectly into the rocky terrain, she was essentially invisible. She continued firing. Her rifle became an extension of her will, each trigger pull a statement of defiance against the idea that she should stay silent and watch good men die. 12 shots. 15. 20. Her shooting was surgical, conservative, making each round count. She had 150 rounds in her kit, but she couldn't afford to waste ammunition on suppression. Every shot had to be a kill. The tide was turning. With the enemy command structure disrupted and their numbers thinning, the insurgents' coordinated assault was falling apart. Some were retreating. Others were still trying to fight but without leadership or tactics. The SEALs, recognizing the shift, went on the offensive. Their return fire became more aggressive, pushing out from the compound to establish a stronger defensive perimeter. Maya maintained her overwatch, picking off targets that threatened the SEALs' advance. She could hear Hawthorne on the radio now, his voice carrying a note of bewildered gratitude as he tried to figure out who was providing support. His requests to his operations center for information went unanswered. No one knew about Maya because she'd gone completely off the grid. 30 shots fired. The remaining insurgents were in full retreat, dragging their wounded and leaving their dead behind. The ambush had become a massacre, but not the one they'd planned. Maya watched them flee into the mountain passes, debating whether to continue engaging. But these were routed forces. The immediate threat was over. She'd saved them. All 8 SEALs were still moving, still fighting. Some were wounded, she could see from their movements, but none critically. They'd survived because she'd made the choice to fire. Now she had to face the consequences. Maya began breaking down her position, carefully collecting her spent brass casings. Even if she was about to be court-martialed, she wouldn't leave evidence scattered across the mountainside like an amateur. She methodically packed her gear, secured her rifle, and began the careful descent from her sniper's perch. She was halfway down the mountain when the helicopters finally arrived. 2 Apaches and a Black Hawk, weapons hot, searching for targets that were already gone. Maya watched them orbit the valley, providing security for the SEALs' extraction. The Black Hawk landed in a storm of dust and prop wash, and she saw the SEAL team loading up. They were going home. Because of her. It took Maya 4 hours to hike back to her original position. By the time she arrived, the sun was setting and her radio was exploding with traffic. Her commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Webb, was furious. Her absence had been discovered, and now search and rescue operations were being organized. She was officially listed as missing, possibly captured or killed. Maya keyed her radio. Ghost 7 to base, I'm fine. Returning to checkpoint. The response was immediate and volcanic. Webb's voice crackled through her earpiece with barely controlled rage. Reeves, where the hell have you been? We've had assets searching for you for 6 hours. She could have lied. Could have claimed equipment malfunction, radio failure, any number of technical excuses that might have been plausible. But Maya had never been good at lying, and she wasn't about to start now. Sir, I relocated to provide overwatch for a SEAL team that was under attack in the Korengal Valley. They were about to be overrun. I engaged hostile forces and provided suppressing fire until the threat was neutralized. The silence on the other end of the radio lasted so long that Maya thought the connection had dropped. When Webb finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. You did what? I saved 8 Navy SEALs, sir. They would have been killed if I hadn't engaged. You left your assigned position. Without orders. Without authorization. Without backup. Do you have any idea what you've done? Maya stared out at the darkening mountains. Yes, sir. I kept 8 Americans from dying today. Get back to base. Immediately. We'll discuss this in person. The radio went dead. The next 72 hours were a bureaucratic nightmare. Maya was confined to base, her weapons confiscated, and her military career hanging by a thread. She spent hours being interrogated by various officers, each asking the same questions in different ways. Why did you disobey orders? Why did you leave your position? What made you think you had the authority to engage in an unauthorized combat operation? Her answers never changed. She saw Americans in danger. She had the skills to help. She made the choice. On the 3rd day, Colonel Webb summoned her to his office. Maya stood at attention, expecting to hear about her court-martial. Instead, she found Webb sitting behind his desk with another man, someone she didn't recognize. He was in civilian clothes, but he carried himself with military bearing. At ease, Sergeant, Webb said, though his tone was anything but relaxed. This is Mr. Peterson. He's with JSOC. Joint Special Operations Command. Maya's stomach tightened. This was bigger than she'd thought. Peterson stood and extended his hand. Staff Sergeant Reeves. I've spent the last 3 days reviewing your actions in the Korengal Valley. I've also spent considerable time speaking with Lieutenant Commander Hawthorne and his team. Maya shook his hand but said nothing. She'd learned that sometimes silence was the best defense. They want to meet you, Peterson continued. The SEALs you saved. Hawthorne has been raising hell through channels trying to find out who provided overwatch that day. Took us a while to piece it together, given that you weren't supposed to be anywhere near that valley. No, sir. I wasn't. What you did was reckless, unauthorized, and violated approximately 15 different regulations. Peterson paused, studying her face. It was also the most impressive display of long-range marksmanship under combat conditions that I've reviewed in 20 years of special operations work. Maya blinked, uncertain where this was going. Peterson pulled a folder from his briefcase and opened it on Webb's desk. 34 confirmed kills at ranges between 900 and 1300 yards. Engaging targets in a complex mountainous environment with variable winds and significant elevation changes. 0 friendly fire incidents. 0 civilian casualties. And you accomplished this while operating completely alone, without support or backup. He looked up at her. The SEAL team didn't lose a single man. They had some wounds, nothing critical. But every analysis we've run says they should have been wiped out. That ambush was designed by someone who knew exactly how SEALs operate. It should have been perfect. But it didn't account for you. Webb spoke up, his earlier anger replaced by something else. Something that might have been grudging respect. Sergeant Reeves, you put me in an impossible position. I should be recommending you for court-martial. You violated the chain of command and acted outside your authority. However, Peterson interjected, Lieutenant Commander Hawthorne is currently sitting in the Pentagon giving testimony about how an unknown Army sniper saved his entire team. JSOC is very interested in understanding how one soldier, acting alone, was able to neutralize a superior force and turn an ambush into a rout. The story is going to come out, one way or another. Maya remained silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Peterson closed the folder. We have two options here, Sergeant. Option 1, we process this through official channels. You get court-martialed for disobeying orders, probably receive a dishonorable discharge, and spend the rest of your life knowing you saved 8 Navy SEALs but lost your career in the process. He paused. Option 2, we classify the entire operation. Your actions get folded into a larger special operations framework. Officially, you were providing authorized overwatch for a JSOC operation. The paperwork gets backdated. Everyone involved signs non-disclosure agreements. Your record stays clean. Maya's mind raced. Why would you do that? Because, Peterson said, JSOC is building specialized sniper teams to work with special operations forces. We need the best shooters we can find, regardless of gender, background, or conventional military structure. Based on what you demonstrated in that valley, you're exactly the kind of operator we're looking for. Webb leaned forward. He's offering you a job, Reeves. A chance to keep doing what you do best, but with the full support and authorization of Joint Special Operations Command. Maya looked between the two men. This didn't feel real. 3 days ago she'd been certain her career was over. Now she was being recruited for special operations work? What would this involve, sir? Peterson smiled. That's classified until you accept the position. But I can tell you that you'd be working with the best warriors this country has. You'd be going places and doing things that officially never happen. And you'd be saving lives, just like you did in the Karengal Valley. Except next time, you'd have the full weight of the U.S. military behind you. Maya thought about those 8 SEALs loading into the helicopter, alive because she'd made the choice to fire. She thought about all the other operators out there, walking into danger every day, sometimes without adequate support or intelligence. She thought about the difference one skilled shooter could make when positioned correctly and given the freedom to act. When do I start, sir? Peterson's smile widened. First, you're going to meet the team you saved. Then we're going to have a very long conversation about your future. But officially? He extended his hand again. Welcome to JSOC, Sergeant Reeves. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in a nondescript building at Fort Bragg, facing 8 Navy SEALs who'd flown in specifically to meet her. Lieutenant Commander Hawthorne stepped forward, and for the first time, she saw his face clearly rather than through a scope at over 1,000 yards. Staff Sergeant Reeves, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute sincerity. My team and I owe you our lives. What you did that day was beyond exceptional. It was miraculous. One of the other SEALs, a younger operator with a bandaged shoulder, spoke up. Ma'am, I've been in some tight spots before, but that day in the valley was the first time I actually thought I wasn't coming home. Then someone started dropping hostiles from the mountains like the hand of God. We had no idea who you were, but we knew someone was fighting like hell to keep us alive." Maya felt emotion tightening her throat, but she kept her voice steady. "I did what any soldier would do when they see Americans in danger." Hawthorne shook his head. "No, Sergeant. You did what few soldiers could do, and even fewer would have the courage to attempt. You violated orders, put your career at risk, and operated completely alone in hostile territory to save people you'd never met. That's not standard operating procedure. That's heroism." The conversation continued for over an hour. The SEALs shared details about the ambush, how they'd realized they were trapped, and the moment when mysterious sniper fire began raining down from the mountains. They described their confusion, then their relief, and finally their determination to find out who had saved them. As the meeting wound down, Hawthorne pulled Maya aside. "I heard you're joining JSOC. That you'll be working with special operations teams." "Yes, sir." "Good. Because I've already put in a request for you to be assigned to support SEAL operations in this theater. I want the shooter who saved my team watching our backs on future missions." He met her eyes. "You're the kind of warrior we need, Reeves. Someone who doesn't just follow orders but understands when the orders are wrong. Someone who has the skill and the courage to do what's necessary, even when it costs them everything." Maya felt something shift inside her chest. For years, she'd fought to prove herself in a military that still questioned whether women belonged in combat. She'd worked twice as hard, shot twice as accurately, and endured twice the scrutiny just to earn the respect her male counterparts received automatically. But standing here, being thanked by these elite warriors who knew exactly what she'd risked and what she'd accomplished, she finally felt like she'd found her place. "I'd be honored to work with your teams, sir." Hawthorne smiled. "The honor is ours, Sergeant. We'll be seeing you downrange." 6 months later, Maya was lying in another hide site, this time officially sanctioned and properly supported, providing overwatch for a SEAL team conducting a high-value target raid in eastern Afghanistan. The operation went flawlessly. The target was captured, no American casualties, and the team extracted successfully. As the helicopters disappeared into the night, Maya began breaking down her position. Her radio crackled. "Ghost 7, this is Trident 6, Hawthorne's voice came through. "Nice shooting today. You kept us safe." Maya smiled in the darkness. "Just doing my job, Trident 6. Copy that, Ghost 7. See you on the next one." Maya packed her gear and began the trek back to her extraction point. The mountains of Afghanistan stretched endlessly around her, harsh and beautiful and deadly. Somewhere out there, more American warriors were walking into danger, facing threats they might not see coming. But they had guardian angels. Shooters like Maya, positioned in the high places, watching, waiting, ready to fire when the moment came. Ready to break the rules if the rules meant good people would die. She'd found her calling on that mountainside 6 months ago. Not in following orders blindly, but in understanding when orders needed to be broken. When doing the right thing meant risking everything. The mountains held their secrets, and Maya Reeves had become one of them. A ghost in the hills. A protector unseen. A warrior who'd proven that sometimes the most important shots aren't the ones you're ordered to take, but the ones you choose to fire when lives hang in the balance. And she was just getting started. We'd love to know which part of the country you're watching this video from. Drop your state or city in the comments below and let us connect with viewers from all across America.